and Grandpa. Let's wander back into the past, then paint me the picture of long ago.
Welcome back to the History of Hill Farms. Today we're going to talk about the 60s. This was a period of time where I guess this would be considered our second great innovation here at Hill Farms. At the time it was Fight for Hill. That great innovation was the Fraser Fir, a tree that many of you know today as probably the number one most popular tree on the market. So Douglas fir was the king of the market, and Uncle Bus went on a trip. And what did he find out?
Well, he went down to Boone, North Carolina. They had the national tree meeting there, and he was highly impressed. So impressed, in fact, that he bought 5,000 plants. But he came home and he said, "Well," he said, "if they ever get these trees up in the north here, we're not going to sell our Douglas fir."
So Fraser Fir is native to North Carolina.
It was native to North Carolina, up in the high mountains.
High mountains.
They thought at that time you had to have at least 3,000 foot elevation or higher for good Fraser fir.
And that was really the only place that Fraser Fir was being raised. They thought they were the only ones that could raise Fraser Fir.
They really thought that they were the only people who could really successfully raise it. And
so this is round two for Uncle Bus. First he did it with the Douglas fir.
Right.
Now he comes back to you with this idea that you're going to raise Fraser Fir.
well, we planted these 5,000 trees. We had no idea about site. We had no idea about soil. We had no idea about pH of the soil. We didn't know what fertility they needed, and of course the aspect, which we found to be extremely important. Today we know just every area in a farm where we can raise them or we can't.
So this was a little bit more complicated than when he brought the Douglas fir here. The Douglas fir, our area here, this farm here, we can raise Douglas fir just about anywhere. So it was a much more adaptable tree. But the Fraser fir was
pockets.
Yeah, the Fraser fir was a little bit more difficult to raise. There was a lot of challenges with that.
Well, the first 5,000 trees we planted, I was disgusted with them. And I'll tell you what, out of those 5,000 trees, I think we sold 3. I would deliberately mow them off because they were like 5 feet tall and they were just a stick. And
not something
I was disgusted. And Uncle Bus kept saying, he said, they grow, but they don't thrive. We got to find a way to make them thrive. Well, I had given up on it pretty well. In fact, it was an accident later on, which we'll talk about later, that really made our Fraser fir start thriving. We found something out there.
So I didn't give up on it, and really, I don't know, during Uncle Bus's tenure, he never really realized his dream there of this tree being the popular tree. It really was in the transition when Steve and I got involved and Uncle Bus was selling. That's when that first crop, where it really the crop we had down here in the flat, that really was the first crop that was like, wow.
Well, that one was by accident.
Yeah, it was by accident.
That was by accident. I had a guy put lime on the field, and he was supposed to put 2 ton an acre, and he come back to me, an old Dutchman. He said, "I got 5 ton an acre on it." Well, I walked across the field and the dust flew. I mean, this was this much lime on this field. So we had the trees and we had to put them in, and all of a sudden we started finding out, man, these things thrived.
Yeah.
And for the first time we started getting really beautiful Fraser fir.
And that's really what Uncle Bus had envisioned. There was a lot of things. It was like so many things happened. It was by accident.
Well, your brother Steve was also, by that time he was starting to get involved. He was a high school boy. He was always for Fraser fir, even though they hadn't looked like much in the past. But it was a step forward. It was another step forward, and it was one of those things again where Uncle Bus was ahead of the industry. He always seemed to have that gut feeling about this is what you have to do to stay ahead.
Yeah, where everyone at that time was running to North Carolina to try to figure out how can we raise these trees in Pennsylvania. Yeah. That really was a mistake because what they were doing there, we couldn't really replicate here, and we shouldn't have tried to be replicating it. We needed to figure out how to raise them here, which was slightly different.
Well, then the average tree farmer was still, now the average guy was fixated on Douglas fir. They were just getting their first crops of Douglas fir, and Douglas fir was everything. In fact, one of the growers said, "This is just a fad, this Fraser fir. It's just another fad." But you know, whenever anybody's ahead of the industry, it's always a fad. Right now, we have another tree going, and I'm sure there's some people think it's a fad.
Well, and that's interesting. So this was at this point, this was the 70s and 80s. It was really the 80s. Everyone was getting a Douglas fir. That was the new tree for a lot of people. So we're pursuing this Fraser fir. So this would have been the 80s where we really started to ramp up production. Right. Now here we are, 2018, and I was at a meeting at State College last year, and now everyone's talking about we got to get Fraser Fir in the ground. 2018. So they're a little bit behind the curve. So I don't know, what are we, about 5 or 6 cycles into our Fraser Fir?
Yeah,
A lot of these guys are really just starting to ramp up.
And, of course, now we're several cycles into a new tree, which they don't really know anything about.
So that really, once again, I can remember there in the 80s, we had all kinds of people from all over the state and out of the state coming here to look at our Fraser
Uncle
Fir.
Bus was pretty well known for his Douglas fir.
Yeah, I think we got known then at that point. At that point, it was L.A. Hill and Sons, where people were coming to see the Fraser Fir.
Yeah, we had changed over, but you know, the Fraser first started under Pfeiffer. I mean,
without a doubt.
Uncle Bus was the inspiration in it.
He was the inspiration, and we finished up and carried on. You know, that
but we
tree.
did get the tree to thrive, and we learned, sometimes very costly, we learned where we could plant it and where we couldn't. And we had to get out with hoses and water the young plants when there was droughts. And we had one year where we lost 3,000 5-footers in one field.
Yeah, and a lot of that was because we were still learning where these things could grow.
We put them on site, said, yeah, when it gave enough rain, we were fine. But, you know, nature's cyclic, and when the dry spells came, all of a sudden, we really took a hammering. I mean, it was tough. I mean...
So after 80 years, we pretty much, with all the different trees that we've raised here now, we kind of know where we can plant each species and what'll thrive, what won't thrive, and try to match the tree to the land. And that's a much better way to do business.
That's what we've learned we really have to do. We learned that Douglas fir, it can't be put in frost pockets. And some of the new trees, we know there's certain things. They don't like wet feet. They don't like wet soil.
So having that Fraser Fir, I think you would agree, probably was a game changer for us. It's been a game changer for the Christmas tree industry, but having that tree before other people did, it became popular. We've never had a problem selling our trees because we had something no one else had.
Oh, that's right. And that's like the tree we have coming now. I mean, we had a guy that comes here, he buys 82 trees every year faithfully, and this year he took 82 of the new tree. He didn't take one Fraser. So you can see the new one's catching on too. So
it's important to have something new for your product cycle. So the Fraser Fir were a big part of the history here of Hill Farms. It served us well, and it was another one of those innovations that was a big gamble, particularly because we had already perfected the Douglas fir, and when everyone else was learning how to raise that, we were moving on to the next species of tree, which still today is our #1 seller.
Tree growers have a tendency, it seems to me, to follow. It seems most of them, they'll listen to what Penn State says, they'll listen. Well, just like now with our new tree, I think we're ahead of Penn State.
Well,
you can't be a follower. I mean, to a degree, but you gotta, in any business, I think you gotta try to see that you're ahead.
Yeah, and that's always worked well. That's been Uncle Bus's blueprint, and we followed that.
Well, that's what he installed in us, probably more than any other thing.
So he kind of was our professor here, passing on a lot of valuable information. So with that said, that really was the big innovation in the '60s. It's really carried our farm for the last 40 plus years, and it looks like it's going to be a.
Well, I have one thing to say yet. By being ahead of the industry with these different trees, first the Douglas, then the Fraser, now the Nordman and Turk, we've never had trouble selling our trees. When there was a glut and people couldn't sell their trees, we always could, because if you want our new tree, you got to take some of the others.
Right.
And that's the way it worked.
And that's a good business lesson to be learned in whatever business that you're in. I think if to be innovative, to stay on the cutting edge, it has its advantages.
Right.
So with that said, we're going to conclude this segment of on the Fraser Fir. Tune in again for our next episode. Thanks a lot. We hope you enjoy our series, The History of Hill Farms. If you have any questions about anything that you've seen in the video, please post a question in the comments section, and we'll try to get back to you. Also, if there's anything you'd like to see in future episodes, please let us know. Thanks a lot.
Grandpa, tell me about the good old days.